What if the most powerful war stories weren't about explosions at all, but about the quiet courage that held a nation together? British cinema has a unique way of showing war not as glory, but as endurance, loss, and sheer humanity. These are the films that skipped the headlines yet stayed with those who found them. From airfields to village streets, they reveal a truth often forgotten. Let's revisit 15 overlooked British World War II dramas that still hit incredibly hard. Number 15. The Gentle Sex, 1943. Before Rosie the Riveter became an icon, Britain already had its own women's revolution, and The Gentle Sex captured it with surprising honesty. Narrated by Leslie Howard, this film follows 7 women from completely different walks of life who enlist in the Auxiliary Territorial Service. There's no glamour, no romantic gloss, just grit, laughter, and the odd moment of homesickness. What makes it powerful is how ordinary everything feels. They train, march, and work through fatigue and fear, learning that strength comes in quieter forms. Howard's narration adds a wry, almost poetic touch. Tragically, this was one of the last things he worked on before his death in the war, giving the film an emotional weight that can't be replicated. It's part recruitment film, part heartfelt tribute. Even the camera work feels intimate, lingering on faces instead of explosions. You see pride and exhaustion mix in a way that only wartime Britain could capture. At its release, critics called it a modest miracle. Audiences saw their sisters, wives, and daughters on screen for the first time not as side characters, but as the backbone of a nation under siege. Watching it today, The Gentle Sex feels like a time capsule of courage, the kind that doesn't ask for medals, just respect. It's quiet heroism in khaki, and it still resonates. Number 14. Angels 1-5, 1952. If you've ever wondered what the Battle of Britain looked like from a cramped command hut instead of the cockpit, Angels 1-5 gives you the answer. This is a film that trades spectacle for sweat, focusing on the human side of aerial warfare. You can almost feel the tension buzzing in the air as radar blips turn into real-life stakes. Released just a decade after the war, it features real RAF veterans and actual Spitfires, no models, no fakes. The story follows a young pilot learning hard lessons about discipline, leadership, and the cost of mistakes. The commanding officer, played by Jack Hawkins, embodies that stoic British resilience that doesn't shout, it just endures. What makes this film so gripping is its honesty. There's no Hollywood triumph here. When planes fall, it's not dramatic, it's quietly devastating. You hear the silence in the operations room, the weight of decisions made in seconds that cost lives. It's less about dogfights and more about the emotional toll of constant danger. The film's title refers to radio slang for flight altitude. Angels 1-5 means 15,000 feet. Fittingly, the film itself operates at that height too, floating somewhere between realism and reverence. It reminds us that the sky wasn't just a battlefield. It was a place where ordinary people faced extraordinary odds, one radar echo at a time. Number 13. A Canterbury Tale, 1944. When Powell and Pressburger made A Canterbury Tale, even they knew it wasn't your usual war movie. There are no tanks, no gunfire, just a mysterious stranger, a quiet village, and a strange act of sabotage involving a glue attack on local women. Sounds bizarre? It is. But beneath that odd surface lies one of the most poetic and quietly patriotic films Britain ever produced. The story follows 3 travelers, a British soldier, an American sergeant, and a local woman brought together in wartime Kent. What begins as a quirky mystery slowly turns into something spiritual and deeply moving. It's about rediscovering England itself, the fields, the churches, the ancient sense of purpose that war threatened to erase. Powell and Pressburger, known for their imagination, turned what could have been propaganda into something timeless. The cinematography feels like a love letter to the countryside, with light and shadow painting hope over rubble. When the characters finally reach Canterbury Cathedral, the symbolism lands quietly but deeply. It's about faith in people, not institutions. Critics didn't know what to make of it back then. Today, it's seen as a masterpiece of quiet resistance, showing how, even amid chaos, a sense of belonging can heal. A Canterbury Tale doesn't shout its message, it whispers it, and somehow that whisper stays with you long after the credits fade. Number 12. Carve Her Name with Pride, 1958. Some films earn your respect in the first 5 minutes, and Carve Her Name with Pride is one of them. It tells the true story of Violette Szabo, a young British mother recruited into the Special Operations Executive. Trained in sabotage and survival, she's parachuted into occupied France to aid the resistance. But what really makes the film unforgettable isn't the mission, it's her spirit. Virginia McKenna gives a performance so sincere, it's hard to believe you're watching fiction. She captures the bravery and vulnerability of a woman torn between love for her child and duty to her country. The film doesn't exaggerate or sensationalize, it lets emotion grow through understatement. When she's captured, it doesn't turn into melodrama, it becomes a study in dignity under unimaginable pressure. Director Lewis Gilbert, who later made several James Bond films, shot this one with restraint. He focuses on human moments, a shared smile, a message scribbled on paper, a promise kept. Those small choices hit harder than any big scene ever could. Upon release, audiences wept openly in theaters. The film became a quiet national catharsis, proving that heroism isn't limited to the battlefield. McKenna later said she felt haunted by Violette's strength, and it shows. Carve Her Name with Pride remains a reminder that courage doesn't always look cinematic, it often looks heartbreakingly human. Number 11. The Long Day's Dying, 1968. If most war films are about the clash of armies, The Long Day's Dying is about the collapse of certainty. It's a grim, cerebral British drama following 3 paratroopers trapped behind enemy lines after D-Day. Forget patriotic speeches, this film dives straight into exhaustion, confusion, and the slow erosion of reason. Shot in claustrophobic close-ups and shadowy interiors, it feels more like a psychological study than a war movie. Each soldier represents a different state of mind: cynicism, duty, and moral paralysis. What binds them is the realization that no one truly wins. It's not about nations, it's about survival of the soul. Director Peter Collinson, who later made The Italian Job, shot it with an almost documentary realism. The sound design is hauntingly minimal, no music, just wind, whispers, and footsteps. It creates an atmosphere that's both hypnotic and nerve-wracking. When it premiered, critics didn't know what to do with it. Too bleak for audiences expecting heroics, too artistic for genre fans. But time has been kind to it. Modern viewers now see it as one of the first British films to capture the trauma beneath victory. By the end, there's no closure, just silence. And maybe that's the point. The Long Day's Dying isn't here to make you cheer. It's here to make you feel the weight of war long after the gunfire stops. It's a forgotten gem that still cuts deep. Number 10. The Wooden Horse, 1950. Before The Great Escape made POW films famous, The Wooden Horse quietly set the standard. It's based on a true story so daring it sounds made up. British prisoners at Stalag Luft III built a wooden gymnastic horse to hide their tunnel, digging beneath it right under the noses of their captors. Every day, men vaulted over the horse while others secretly shoveled dirt underneath. Talk about creative problem-solving under pressure. The beauty of this film is its simplicity. There's no Hollywood sheen, no big explosions, just claustrophobic tension, muted heroism, and remarkable restraint. It's all about teamwork, ingenuity, and faith in small chances. The actors, including Anthony Steele and David Tomlinson, were mostly real veterans. That gives it a natural grit modern war movies often miss. You see the exhaustion, the camaraderie, and the humor that kept them sane. What also makes it special is how understated it is. The direction by Jack Lee avoids melodrama entirely. The moment they finally break through the last layer of dirt is filmed in near silence, relying on expressions, not dialogue. It's raw, and it's real. When the film came out, critics praised its authenticity and modesty. It didn't glorify, it observed. It reminded audiences that victory often comes from persistence, not glory. Later filmmakers openly admitted it inspired The Great Escape and even influenced parts of the bridge on the River Kwai. The Wooden Horse is a story of quiet genius and courage, proof that some of the best victories are invisible until they're done. Number 9. The Small Back Room, 1949. Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger weren't just filmmakers, they were magicians. And The Small Back Room might be their darkest spell. Forget the grandeur of the red shoes. This is a war story stripped down to nerve and pain. It follows Sammy Rice, a bomb disposal scientist struggling with alcoholism and insecurity as he tries to defuse a mysterious new device. This isn't about combat. It's about the war inside the mind. David Farrar plays Rice with haunting restraint, a man both brilliant and broken. Kathleen Byron, his partner in both love and patience, brings warmth that makes the despair hit harder. The back room of the title isn't just a workplace, it's a metaphor for the overlooked, underpaid, and undercredited engineers who helped win the war from the shadows. Visually, it's stunning. The lighting turns ordinary rooms into psychological battlegrounds. A nightmare sequence of giant whiskey bottles and ticking bombs perfectly captures the character's inner torment years before Hollywood discovered the idea of cinematic trauma. When it premiered, audiences expecting action were baffled, but critics soon recognized it as one of the first truly modern psychological war dramas. It showed that heroism could be self-control, not gunfire. The Small Back Room is grim, smart, and deeply British, unafraid to show that the hardest wars are often fought within. Watching it today, it feels ahead of its time, proving that real courage can look like quiet desperation wrapped in a tweed jacket. Number 8. The Hill, 1965. Few films capture psychological endurance like The Hill. Set in a British military prison in the North African desert, it's not about enemies, it's about authority. Sean Connery stars as a soldier punished for insubordination, forced to climb an artificial sandhill under blistering heat again and again until men start collapsing. It's not a war film in the traditional sense, it's an interrogation of what war does to morality itself. Director Sidney Lumet, known for his emotional intensity, turned this into a pressure cooker of sweat, sand, and cruelty. The black and white cinematography is blindingly bright, making you feel every drop of sweat and every ounce of exhaustion. Connery, fresh off his James Bond fame, took this role specifically to break his image, and it worked. His performance is furious, raw, and unforgettable. The real power of The Hill lies in its moral tension. The officers who enforce punishment aren't monsters, they're bureaucrats, following rules. And that's what makes it terrifying. It's a film about obedience versus conscience, dignity versus despair. When it premiered, it wasn't a box office hit, but critics adored it. Roger Ebert called it one of the most honest portrayals of institutional cruelty ever filmed. Over the years, it's been rediscovered as one of Connery's best performances. The Hill doesn't need explosions, it burns with something scarier. The war that happens after the war, when order turns into oppression. It hits you like a sandstorm, slow, suffocating, and unforgettable. Number 7. The One That Got Away, 1957. It's not often a British film tells the story of the other side, but The One That Got Away does, and brilliantly. It's the true story of Franz von Wehr, the only German prisoner of war to escape British custody and make it back home during World War II. The film follows his incredible string of escapes, jumping from trains, crawling through mud, bluffing guards, all powered by one thing: audacity. Hardy Kruger, who actually served briefly in the war himself, plays von Wehr with such charisma that you almost forget he's technically the enemy, but that's what makes this film fascinating. It's not about sides, it's about obsession, courage, and the universal need for freedom. Director Roy Ward Baker keeps the pacing tight, emphasizing suspense over spectacle. The escapes are so tense you can feel your pulse sinking with every close call. No swelling music, no melodrama, just realism. Kruger even performed most of his own stunts, adding a layer of authenticity that still stands out decades later. When the film was released, it shocked audiences by treating a German character with sympathy, but critics applauded its balance and nuance. It's a story of grit that transcends borders, reminding us that resilience isn't owned by any one flag. Today, The One That Got Away stands as a quietly radical piece of filmmaking, one that saw humanity even in the so-called enemy. It's suspenseful, surprising, and impossible to forget once you've seen it. Number 6. The Colditz Story, 1955. By now, POW escape film sounds familiar, but the Colditz Story is where the legend really began. Based on the real experiences of British officers imprisoned in Germany's supposedly escape-proof Colditz Castle, it's a blend of dark humor, frustration, and sheer ingenuity. If you've ever rooted for an underdog, this one's for you. John Mills leads a sharp ensemble cast that captures the mix of boredom and brilliance that defined life in captivity. The film doesn't romanticize, it shows the endless planning, the small defeats, and the rare victories that made survival possible. There's an entire scene dedicated to building fake uniforms out of stolen bed sheets, and it's somehow more suspenseful than a car chase. Director Guy Hamilton, who later made Goldfinger, keeps things fast-paced and witty. The prisoners outsmart their guards not through strength but through imagination, a very British kind of rebellion. You can feel the collective brainpower buzzing through every scene. Audiences loved it when it premiered, calling it the thinking man's war film. Critics praised its authenticity, helped by the fact that several technical advisors were real Colditz escapees. And though it's lighter in tone than later prison dramas, that makes it more human. The Colditz Story proves that courage doesn't always roar it, sometimes whispers through laughter, coded notes, and clever disguises. It's thrilling, oddly cheerful at times, and still one of the best reminders that wit can be as powerful as will. Number 5. The Captive Heart, 1946. Released just a year after the war ended, The Captive Heart hit differently because Britain was still healing. This isn't a film about soldiers fighting, it's about soldiers remembering. It tells the story of a Czech officer who escapes a concentration camp by posing as a dead British soldier. Captured again, he's sent to a British POW camp where he must maintain his disguise among men whose real comrade is gone. Michael Redgrave gives one of his most subtle, moving performances. You can see the exhaustion behind his eyes, the fear of being discovered mingling with survivors' guilt. The story isn't about big escapes or victories. It's about small acts of humanity. Letters to loved ones, quiet talks in the barracks, the fragile hope that something worth living for still exists. The film was directed by Basil Dearden, who avoided propaganda in favor of empathy. He fills the story with detailed, tiny gestures that reveal a lot. A prisoner polishing his shoes before mail call, a guard offering tea instead of threats. Those small choices give the film its emotional gravity. When it premiered, audiences recognized something in it they'd lived themselves, grief mixed with grace. The Captive Heart reminds us that even in captivity, compassion can be freedom. It's a story about identity, forgiveness, and the invisible scars that linger long after peace is declared. It doesn't just move you, it makes you grateful for the quiet strength that kept people going when everything else had fallen apart. Number 4. The Dam Busters, 1955. You can't talk about British wartime cinema without mentioning The Dam Busters. Even if you haven't seen it, you've heard its theme music somewhere. It's practically the sound of triumph itself. But beneath the familiar fanfare lies a film that's far more complex than people remember. Based on the real Operation Chastise, it tells how scientist Barnes Wallis invented the bouncing bomb to destroy German dams. What sets the film apart is how grounded it feels. There's no swagger, no glamour, just exhausted men trying to make the impossible work. Michael Redgrave plays Wallis as a man haunted by his own brilliance, and Richard Todd's portrayal of Wing Commander Gibson is pure steel and sorrow. The production used real RAF bases and aircraft, making it almost documentary in tone. Director Michael Anderson focused on tension, not spectacle. You see long stretches of planning, frustration, and moral uncertainty. The final mission sequence is a masterclass in pacing. It builds like a heartbeat, then leaves you stunned when you realize what the cost of success truly was. When it premiered, it was a national event. But what keeps the Dam Busters relevant isn't just its technical achievement, it's its humility. It captures a country that didn't celebrate victory with cheers, but with silence. Because every win came with a price. To this day, it's still studied by filmmakers for its realism and restraint. Heroic, yes, but heartbreakingly so. Number 3. The Cruel Sea, 1953. If there's one film that defines British endurance during the war, it's The Cruel Sea. Forget tanks and trenches. This is war fought on open water where the enemy is as much the ocean as it is anything else. Jack Hawkins plays Captain Erickson, a man worn down by the endless tension of escorting convoys through the deadly Atlantic. The crew fights exhaustion, isolation, and guilt. There's one unforgettable moment when Erickson must make a split-second decision that haunts him for the rest of the film. It's a gut punch that defines everything the movie stands for. Director Charles Friend, adapting Nicholas Montserrat's novel, insisted on accuracy. Real Royal Navy ships were used, and several cast members were wartime veterans themselves. You can feel it in every frame, the authenticity, the fatigue, the salt-stung realism. Critics called it flawless. Historian James Holland said it was the most realistic war film ever made. But what truly elevates it is the emotional honesty. It shows command not as glory but as burden, loyalty not as obedience but as love. The sea becomes a living symbol, beautiful, terrifying, and indifferent to human struggle. When the credits roll, you don't feel entertained, you feel changed. The Cruel Sea isn't just about war. It's about what happens when courage meets futility and still refuses to sink. It's one of the most human war stories ever filmed, and it still holds up like a ship built to weather any storm. Number 2. Went the Day Well, 1942. Long before invasion thrillers became a genre, Went the Day Well shocked audiences with a scenario that felt almost unthinkable, a peaceful English village quietly infiltrated by disguised invaders. What starts as a cozy countryside drama turns into one of the most chilling and subversive British films of the war. Directed by Alberto Cavalcanti and produced by Ealing Studios, it's both suspenseful and deeply unsettling. The villagers, played by Leslie Banks, Thora Hird, and a host of character actors, slowly realize that their friendly soldiers aren't who they claim to be. The tension builds through everyday details: a wrong accent, a suspicious glance, a too-perfect smile, until paranoia turns to action. What's remarkable is how early it was made, right in the middle of the war. It served partly as a warning. Stay alert, anyone could be the enemy. But it also captured something deeply human: ordinary people discovering extraordinary courage. The film's quiet characters, from the postmistress to the schoolteacher, become unlikely heroes in the face of deception. It's also incredibly modern in tone, tight, fast-paced, and unflinching. For its time, it was shockingly intense, showing that evil could wear a friendly face. Decades later, it influenced everything from The Eagle Has Landed to Red Dawn. Went the Day Well isn't just a war film, it's a study in trust, fear, and survival. It reminds us that sometimes the battlefield isn't overseas, it's right in your own backyard. Number 1. The Way to the Stars, 1945. If The Cruel Sea shows the war's endurance, The Way to the Stars shows its heartbreak. Released as the conflict was ending, it's one of the most emotional British war films ever made. It follows RAF pilots stationed at a small English airbase, balancing duty with the quiet tragedies of love and loss. John Mills, Michael Redgrave, and Trevor Howard form the core cast, but it's the film's tone that lingers. There are no grand speeches, no dramatic victories, just life going on amid uncertainty. The airmen joke, fall in love, say goodbye, and sometimes don't return. Each scene carries the quiet ache of impermanence. The script, co-written by Terence Rattigan, came directly from his own RAF experiences, and it shows. Dialogue feels lived in, not written. The background hum of engines and wind through open windows becomes a kind of ghostly soundtrack. Director Anthony Asquith captures wartime Britain with haunting intimacy teacups rattling in the mess hall, letters passed quietly, laughter echoing in empty hangars. It's less about war than about waiting for it to end. When it premiered, audiences wept. Critics called it a film that understands silence. It captures something eternal, the dignity of people who carry on when they have every reason not to. The Way to the Stars doesn't glorify war, it humanizes it. It's soft-spoken, devastating, and unforgettable. If courage had a sound, it would be the whisper of engines fading into the night sky. So there you have it, 15 British war dramas that never shouted for attention but earned it anyway. They prove that the loudest stories aren't always the truest ones. These films weren't made to celebrate, they were made to remember. Which of these have you seen? Or better yet, which one are you adding to your watch list tonight? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and keep exploring the stories that history almost forgot.